You ready? Please do. I need to. No! Goddamn idiot!
Go.
What the fuck are you doing?
Making it better.
Why are you farting in my chair? I'm going to read you a brief history of time in an English accent. Here we go. Where was I?
It's like looking into a mirror.
Ptolemy's model provided a reasonably accurate system for predicting the positions of heavenly bodies in the sky. But in order to predict these positions correctly, Ptolemy had to make an assumption that the moon followed a path that sometimes brought it twice as close to the earth as other times, and that meant that the moon ought sometimes to appear twice as big as other times. Ptolemy recognized this flaw, but nevertheless his model was generally, although not universally, accepted. It was adopted by the Christian Church as the picture of the universe that was in accordance with Scripture, for it had the great... Now I'm reading this off of brief history of time. www.amazon.com. For it had the great advantage that it left lots of room outside the sphere of fixed stars for heaven and hell. A simpler model, however, was proposed in 1514 by a Polish priest, Nicholas Copernicus, who I'm sure you've heard of. At first, perhaps for fear of being branded a heretic by his church, Copernicus circulated
make you feel like all the
his
girls
model anonymously. Hey! You get out of here, you lads! Get out of here!
I'm making you feel like the only girl in the world tonight.
His idea was that the sun was stationary at the center, and that the earth...
Oh yeah, you can good, boy.
...in circular orbits around the sun. Get out of here! I'm reading a brief history in time, hey! Get out of here!
Yeah, I'm unplugged.
No! I'm still reading a little bit of this excerpt. Now,
Hold up, nigga. I'm not plugged in.
you need to quiet down back there with your slang.
Make you feel like
Nearly a century passed before this idea was taken seriously. Then two astronomers, the German Johannes Kepler and the Italian Galileo Galilei, started publicly to support the Copernican theory, despite the fact that the orbit it's predicted did not quite match the ones observed. The death blow to the Aristotelian Ptolemaic theory came in 1609. In that year, Galileo started observing the night sky with a telescope, which had just been invented when he looked at the planet Jupiter. Galileo found that it was accompanied by several small satellites or moons that orbited around it. This implied that everything did not have to orbit directly around the Earth, as Aristotle and Ptolemy had thought. It was, of course, still possible to believe that the Earth was stationary at the center of the universe, and that the moons of Jupiter moved on extremely complicated paths around the Earth, giving the appearance that they orbited Jupiter. However, Copernicus's theory was much simpler. At the same time, Johannes Kepler had modified Copernicus's theory, suggesting that the planets moved not in circles but in ellipses. An ellipse is an elongated circle. The predictions now finally match the observations.
I need a pee.
Go pee then, lad! Get out of here!
What are we doing?
Get out of here!
Reading about Mr. Hawking?
It's called a brief history in time. You need to leave now! You're ruining everything of the excerpt.
Shut up!
You're ruining everything of the excerpt, you little twat.
I'm gonna go pee.
And back to the readings. Brief history of time. Stephen Hawking. As far as Kepler was concerned, elliptical orbits were merely an ad hoc hypothesis, and a rather repugnant one at that, because ellipses were clearly less perfect than circles. Having discovered almost by accident that elliptical orbits fit the observations well, he could not reconcile them with his idea that the planets were made to orbit the sun by magnetic forces. An explanation was provided only much later, in 1687. when Sir Isaac Newton published in Philosophiae Naturalis Principia Mathematica, probably the most important single work ever. This has been reading an excerpt in my English language. A Brief History in Time by Stephen Hawking. Thank you and have a good night, YouTube community.